Hey everyone, this is James from TDB bringing you another Inbetweenisode. Today I am going to be talking about Bulang, which is a tea growing area. It is in Munghai County, which is the western side of Xishuangbanna. If you think about it, the eastern side is Munghai County and the six famous tea mountains, with Yola being the only one that's outside of Munghai County. The west side is Munghai County. So all of these areas, very historically important growing areas that have been growing pu'er tea. Have a long history of growing pu'er tea, which is a little bit, can be said more about these areas than certainly the ones that are way up north and something like Linsang. So Bulang is located in Munghai County, as I stated earlier, and it's kind of cousins with a lot of the areas around it. So you have places like Nanul, Mongsong, Bada. These are all within there. And most notably, Munghai Tea Factory is located in Munghai County. So, of course, a lot of this material from those areas I just listed, as well as Bulang, ends up getting put into a lot of their productions throughout the years, certainly historically, and even probably still today, where they have a number of plantations based there. So it's interesting to think about when we start to signify the different areas and the regions that pu'er is grown. In particular, you start to see Bulang pop up, I'm guessing in the early 2000s or so. And the other important part with Bulang, too, is it's a mountain, but there are also areas within that mountain, some of which are particularly well known. Probably most notably Banjong and Lao Banjong. So you have these kind of sub-villages and sub-areas within Bulang that are very, very well known, command a very high price tag. Lamane, that's another one. Bon Pen to a lesser extent. So you will have these teas that are Bulang teas, but really they will specify an area more specific because that area is more sought after for whatever reason, whether it's a good idea or not. And so one of the general trends you will see in pu'er is that the areas are going to start to get more and more specific. So what's kind of happened over time, and I think I've seen Marshall make this point, is that bigger areas like Bulang and Iwu, you see it now, and it means something different almost than it did 20 years ago. Now it's kind of used as like a generic, cheaper term. Whereas like now, if you have like a really high price tea, you're going to want to specify which village or whatnot. You're not going to be like, oh, it's a Bulang tea. You're not going to call it like a just whatever area Bulang, like 2025 Waititi Bulang or whatever, or 2025 Waititi Iwu. That would kind of signify on its own that it's not a very pricey, worthwhile tea. You would usually want to specify something a little bit more specific. And probably Waititi is a terrible example because they don't even kind of name the areas that it is from. So yeah, it's part of both like this greater area of Munghai County, and it has very small notable areas. I think it really did start to just pick up steam in kind of the early 2000s. You have productions at that time, the Bok Choy series made by Dai, that Munghai Tea Factory at the time, that kind of specify that they are supposedly Banjong material. At least that's how they are kind of marketed today. So you kind of see that term taking off. And then you start to see Bulang productions taking off a little bit after that. I'm trying to think. I swear I've seen some in the early 2000s. But the ones that are coming to mind are 2004, 2005. The Nanqiao Peak Lion series is probably one of the most well-known there, where they pressed the 2004 Double Lion, and they pressed a couple versions in 2005, and I think 3 or maybe even 4 versions in 2006. So these are all regionally specified as Bulang teas. So why am I talking about this so much? Well, one of the reasons is I did a Bulang report where I drank through a lot of the teas, and there really is kind of a house taste to these things. You have a couple different profiles. Some of them are a little bit sweeter, a little bit narrower, but in my opinion, my favorite ones are the biggest ones. They have big texture. Sometimes they'll have big bitterness, but a lot of it is accompanied with a really fast returning sweetness Huigan. And so you really see this in things like those Double Lions productions from Nanqiao that they made at the time. But really my favorite teas up there. I am not generally a fan of the times when regions around here, Laomane I think is particularly well known for it, but I don't know that it's like all Laomane tea of this kind of like potent, pervasive, lingering bitterness. Really not my favorite. And it's interesting to have some of those productions and ripes where that bitterness continues to linger after, which is like ripening. The process should soften and mellow it out. So it's interesting to see that the note is so strong in there that it continues on. So yeah, that is a bit about Bulang. Just been thinking through that, and that's a little bit about kind of the taste profile. In my opinion, it's a pretty delicious taste profile. It can be pretty good on its own, but it could be even better when you blend it with kind of the surrounding areas, and that's sort of one of the philosophies of the Munghai Tea Factory blends, is that you're blending the interesting material from Bulang with other areas that are bringing different things. So Bada or something for kind of its unique fragrance, Mungsong, I don't know. They all have a little bit of different things that they're bringing to the table, and the idea behind blending is basically that you're kind of mixing it to make something a little bit more layered, a little bit more textured, and a little bit more interesting. So yeah, let's see. So I would say in terms of teas to check out, the Double Lion series is definitely a great place to start as far as trying to understand Bulang. Those teas have the big expansiveness that I really like, in particular the 502 Double Lion. The 2004, in my opinion, is probably just as good of a tea, but it's a little bit different. It's a little bit weirder. In my opinion, it sort of borders on more of a boutique style more than the 502 does, at least in my limited experience. A couple others, I don't like these quite as much as the Double Lion, but I think they're easily accessible and worth checking out. Scott has a 2002 Bulang brick, I think, and it really has this very old school taste. It's not something you would necessarily expect from Yunnan sourcing. They also have a 2006 Liming Arbor King, which is Kunming stored, but I think despite it being Kunming stored, it does display a lot of the characteristics that we're talking about. I think it's a pretty good tea. Probably needs quite a bit more time, but it's a tea that I would probably recommend along with the Double Lions. There's a couple other productions, but they are not currently available as far as I could tell. So yeah, that kind of wraps up this episode on Bulang. Basically, kind of what it is, where it is, as far as an area, kind of the taste profile. So what you're looking at is potentially a pretty bitter brew, not always, but fairly, and a quick returning sweetness. So it's a very obvious profile once you kind of know what to look out for. And I think it's a very poorish profile in that sense as well. Iwu in general, I think, is a little bit more complicated in terms of the aftertaste and the texture that it comes, a little bit more elegant. Bulang is pretty straightforward in my opinion. So I think those Double Lions are great to sort of understand it, but also understanding that it's in a lot of those Munghai Tea Factory productions too. And then a couple teas to try there. So the Double Lions you can get at a bunch of different places. It is first popularized by Teas We Like and Pedro, who I think is the first person I ever saw talk about it. So shout outs to Pedro, shout outs to Teas We Like. Let me know how you like this episode, and I will see you next time. Cheers. Oh, one last thing I wanted to add. When we think about the areas that have gotten important in the mid-2000s in particular, the eastern side of this, of Xishuangbanna, so we're talking about Yiwu, was a lot more, there was a lot of boutique operations, particularly Taiwanese, that went over there and sourced tea from there. On the other hand, the area around Munghai Tea Factory has long been associated with factories. It's been associated with ripe, poor tea. And so as a result, the associations with like big versus small are a little bit different. Of course, that has constantly changed as there are plenty of boutique operations that will try to press tea in Bulang these days. But it's interesting to see that they kind of developed at different rates in somewhat different styles as well. So thank you all for tuning in. I will see you all next time. Cheers.